share my screen. 1 second. Alrighty. And we're going to take a trip out into the universe. My name is Dr. Kimberly Arcand. I'm a visualization scientist for NASA's Chandra X Observatory at the Center for Astrophysics, Harvard and Smithsonian. And today we're going to be talking about sensing our universe using data beyond sight. I am a next generation kind of gal, so I'll have lots of references in the next generation here in my talk, and I hope you all enjoy them. So just a quick abstract, like Geordi on Star Trek: The Next Generation, we can experience our universe beyond sight through scientific translations that turn data from NASA missions, such as the Chandra X Observatory or the James Webb Space Telescope, into sounds, into 3D prints, into holograms and haptic responses. In other words, we're going to boldly go where no one has gone before. And just a little TNG thing here. This is Stephan's quintet, which is supposedly a group of 5 galaxies, as the name would imply. But there are actually only 4 lights in here because one of those galaxies on the left side is in the foreground and not a part of the galaxy group. So there are 4 lights. All right, so let's get started. I'm going to talk a little bit about seeing beyond the visible light regime, right? We're all pretty familiar with visible light. That's what we use most days to be able to access information of the world around us. But if we only use visible light to be able to understand our universe, it'd be like only having access to middle C and a couple keys on either side. The rest of the piano would be dark. Now, once we can fill in all the rest of that information of the universe with all the other types of light, from X-ray light to infrared light and gamma ray light to radio light, now we have access to all of the keys on the keyboard. So you can think about how limiting it would be to play music with just middle C and a few keys on either side, and how much more breadth of music you have when you have all 88 keys to work with. So let's take a look at these different kinds of light. We have, as I mentioned, radio, microwave, infrared, visible, ultraviolet, X-rays, and gamma rays. You're probably familiar with a number of these. X-rays at the dentist or the doctor, for example, gamma rays for certain kinds of medical treatments, infrared light to talk to devices, microwave light to be able to heat up food, and different kinds of things that we access here on Earth. So we can think about different kinds of objects out in our universe as emitting different kinds of light, like our own star, the sun, for example. Our sun, of course, emits visible light. That is what we see during the day. However, it also emits many other kinds of light, including X-ray light, including infrared light, including radio. And so it's important to be able to understand all of these different kinds of light, because we get to learn different things when we study those different portions of the electromagnetic spectrum. So how do we study light in the distant cosmos? We build really cool spacecraft and we send them up, usually into outer space, because our atmosphere is like a superpower of the Earth. It's protective, right? So it protects us from different kinds of light. And so this is just a little animation of the Chandra X Observatory that I get to work for. And so what we can see here is that there's an object in the universe. That light has been traveling to us over very long distances and long periods of time. The spacecraft is pointed at the object to study. That light, those photons, which are just bits of energy, they enter the spacecraft and then they are sort of skimmed down to the very base of the spacecraft. And then they are packaged up into the form of ones and zeros, a sort of digital binary suitcase, if you will, and sent down to Earth through NASA's Deep Space Network. They go to the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California before finally making their way to the Operations Control Center, where I am here in New England. And we're having a very blustery day. So if at any point my internet gets a little wobbly, it's because we've had wind gusts at like 60, 65 miles an hour today. So it's been an exciting day. All right, so we have telescopes like Chandra. Chandra goes about a third of the way to its moon at its farthest distance from Earth in its orbit. And that allows it to have a really great sort of uninterrupted view of the high energy universe that it gets to capture. Chandra is about the size of a school bus, and it was launched over 25 years ago, past July. So here is just a quick little snippet of the launch video from 1999.
T-minus 15, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. We have a go for engine start, 0. We have booster ignition and liftoff of Columbia, reaching new heights for women in X-ray astronomy.
So Chandra was a special mission. It was the largest payload ever launched by the space shuttle, and it was a riskier flight as a result of that extra weight. It made the abort scenarios very challenging. So if the astronauts that are pictured on the left side of the screen had to come back home with Chandra still in the stomach of the space shuttle, it would have been very difficult to safely get that equipment home because of all of the extra weight. So they really had to train extra hard to make sure they had everything ready to go. But this was also another amazing mission because Eileen Collins was the first woman to command a NASA space mission when she took the realm of this mission, STS-93 for Chandra. And she's pictured on the lower left. And then on the upper right is Dr. Katie Coleman. And she was actually primarily responsible for the deployment of Chandra. So making sure Chandra got out of the spacecraft bay and into outer space. And this is just a picture of Chandra before it was deployed. And one of the fun things I always appreciated was that during space shuttle missions, the wake-up calls were selected music by the crew. And so each crew member got to select a different piece of music to wake up from the NASA Control Center down here on the ground. And this was Flight Day 5 selection, which I thought was rather appropriate for Chandra going off on its way to work.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again, because a vision softly creeping left its seeds while I was sleeping.
Really just any excuse to play that song because I absolutely adored it. So what is very interesting is that Chandra was conceptualized over 50 years ago, right? Before the first exoplanet discoveries, before the first detection of gravitational waves, before the first images of black holes, before Webb launched. And I'm kind of always amazed that I have been around to witness all of these amazing launches and discoveries and exciting new things in astronomy during the course of my career. But Chandra has yet been able to work alongside with all of these missions, all of these cutting edge observatories and programs to better help us understand other worlds, more black holes than ever before. Chandra is called a black hole hunter, for example, powerful neutron star mergers, and more. And then Chandra, of course, works alongside a team of what I like to think of as super friends. The James Webb Space Telescope is one of the newest additions to Chandra's super friend team and is an absolutely exquisite piece of spacecraft, being able to capture some of the most beautiful, deep, and scientifically exciting images that are just wonderful to be able to partner with Chandra data, with other data from the Hubble Space Telescope, with data from retired telescopes like the Spitzer Space Telescope. It's just an amazing time to have access to so much of this high quality information of our universe. And of course, the Hubble Space Telescope. I've already mentioned this beauty once. Hubble is an American icon, a classic, right? And still doing incredibly useful scientific work and providing these amazing scientific outputs as it's about to celebrate its 35th anniversary this year. And other telescopes as well. I mentioned the Spitzer Space Telescope, which is another infrared telescope. It took slightly larger field of view than Webb is currently doing. And so it can also help sort of provide additional context, fields of view, etc., and many more. But the point is we need these different kinds of spacecraft because you need very specific instruments, very specific detectors to be able to access those very specific kinds of light, right? So whether it's X-ray light, whether it's ultraviolet, optical, or infrared, as you see in the image before you, these are all showing the same field of view of the M51 galaxy, which is also known as the whirlpool, right? So let's take a quick look at each one again. The X-ray, you're seeing a little tiny bit of that spiral structure, but mostly what you're seeing is diffuse hot gas. You're seeing really compact energetic sources, things like black holes, X-ray binaries, exploded stars, neutron stars, and then the really hot gas that kind of encompasses all of that. Now, if you look at it in ultraviolet light, now you're starting to see some more mature stars, for example, that have the ultraviolet emissions. You're starting to see a little bit more of that spiral structure as well. In optical light, now you're getting a very clear picture of kind of what we think of as the stereotypical image, if you will, of a galaxy, particularly a spiral galaxy. You're clearly able to see the gas and those dusty lanes. You're seeing those bright spots where there's a lot of intensity, right? You're seeing just millions and millions of stars. And now in infrared light, we're seeing down to the coolest material now, the coolest emissions rather. And now we're kind of seeing down to the bones of that spiral galaxy. But when you add them all up, you get a really complete picture of what this spiral galaxy is all about and its little companion up there at the top. And you can clearly see in here, you can very surely make out there are purples that you can still see with those really energetic compact sources, right? You can see those cool bones of the dust lanes in the red. You can see those mature star groups in the ultraviolet, right? And then, of course, you can see not only the green of the optical, but also the bright, bright white, where all of those are adding up in the downtown region of that central core in the main galaxy, as well as the companion galaxy up top. So it really helps us to understand these objects in a much more complete way, which is great for us, right? We are a species here on Earth, and we're trying to learn about the objects around us because we are part of a solar system. We are part of a galaxy. We are part of a local group, right? There are all of these things that are happening around us, and being able to understand those different ecosystems, if you will, is a very important thing. All right. Well, now we're going to buckle our seatbelts because we're going to go on a brief multi-wavelength tour of our universe through light. So engage. Here we go. I'm going to show you some of my favorite stops, some of my favorite sites to see, if you will. This first image and pretty much every image I show you, they are going to be a combination of those different kinds of light because that multi-wavelength perspective of our universe is, as I mentioned, so incredibly critical to understanding the processes, the hows and the whys of what it is that we're looking at. So this is a classic, the Eagle Nebula, also known as the Pillars of Creation. We're looking at this primarily in infrared light from James Webb, along with X-ray light from Chandra. So in infrared light, you're seeing those tall columns of gas and dust, and then the sort of bright little boops that you're seeing, those sources, those are slightly older stars that have been maturing. They've left the nest, so to speak. They're throwing little temper tantrums as mature stars are wont to do in the X-ray light so that Chandra can capture them. This is another favorite of mine, 30 Doradus. It's also the image that is behind me as I'm speaking today. This is a very large, complex area of star formation, and it is really beautiful. 30 Doradus is also known as the Tarantula Nebula. If you zoom out, you can understand that moniker a little better. It looks kind of arachnid-like. And in this case, again, we're seeing the sort of cooler gas and dust in the infrared on the upper left and along the lower right. And then you'll see that there are these cavities. Those cavities are actually caused by stars that are sort of blowing out the stuff around them. And that blue that you're seeing is the X-ray light as a result. This one is called Zeta Ophiuchi. It's kind of like a star on the run. It's moving and it's got this gorgeous shockwave. And I've tried to sprinkle in a few of my favorite quotes here. This one is from Geordi, that everything was normal. And then suddenly it's like the laws of physics went right out the window. I thought this was appropriate to see this star on the run. And that was a combination, by the way, of data from the Spitzer Space Telescope and Chandra as well. This image now on my screen is called R Aquarii. It is a combination of Chandra X-ray data in purple along with Hubble data in like a sort of goldy, coppery kind of color. And in this case, in the core, which is really bright white and it's kind of blown out a bit, there are two stars that are dancing together. And as a result of that tug and war between those two stars that are dancing, all of this material is sort of being blown out as a result. Just a really lovely image. The Helix Nebula is a fascinating object. It's called a planetary nebula, which really doesn't have much bearing on what the object is. It's just a historical name from when we didn't have such advanced telescopes and we thought these were actually planets of some kind. But this is actually an example of what our own sun could look like in about, say, 5 billion years or so. So what we have here is inside the very central region, there was a sun-like star. As those stars age, they tend to puff up and then they expel their outer layers. Excuse me. That material then sort of fluffs out, and you can see it causes these incredible, beautiful structures. And in this case, we're looking at this object in four kinds of light: X-ray, ultraviolet, infrared, and optical. Again, really helps give you a complete picture. The higher energy material you can see mostly in that central region. Then as you get out towards the perimeter, you're seeing a lot more of the optical and the infrared, for example, and those beautiful delicate structures. Now, this object is probably one of my favorites ever. I think it is my favorite ever. It's called Cassiopeia A. It's a supernova remnant, an exploded star. Stars that are really more massive than our sun, at least 8 to 10 times more massive than our sun. When they start to run out of fuel, they essentially collapse and then just explode their guts out all over the place. And this is a wonderful process of sort of stellar recycling because the iron, the silicon, the sulfur, the calcium, all of those elements are sort of spewed out into the area around it and eventually, over huge periods of time, swept up into new generations of stars, of planets, of people. So quite literally, the oh, hold on, wait, please. Sorry, my dog just fought. I don't know what was happening. I hope you couldn't hear that. So anyways, these stars that have exploded their guts out all over the place, they are just incredible views of what it looks like as things are sort of transitioning from death into life. And so those deaths must be avenged. Oops. See. Okay, we're going to now look at another galaxy. This is M74, also called the Pinwheel Galaxy. We're looking at this in optical and infrared and X-ray light. And again, you can trace the beautiful spiral structure and those compact sources and that really superheated gas. And of course, we have galaxies that interact together. This is called VV340. It looks like an exclamation mark, but again, it's two galaxies that are interacting, and you can see the combination of optical light as well as the X-ray light in like that sort of pinkish, magenta-ish color around it. And as we're still getting bigger and bigger still in these cosmic objects, this is called the Cartwheel Galaxy. And this, you can see, kind of looks like it's got a lot of spokes and it's a beautiful object. And again, we're now looking at this in X-ray light, in optical light, and in infrared light. So you can see how all of that material interacts together in these different objects. And then the last one on my little sort of mini tour of the universe is called the Cheshire Cat cluster of galaxies. Galaxies essentially reside in huge groups, either tens, if not hundreds, and sometimes in the biggest ones, thousands of galaxies all kind of bundled together in envelopes of hot gas. And this one, because of gravitational lensing, which causes that sort of interesting line structure around the perimeter and like the smiley face, for example, that is the gravitational lensing or the bending of light. And so it was nicknamed the Cheshire Cat, which I always very much appreciate a smile. So you having a good laugh now, cute, right? All right, so all of that data that I showed you, it all results from the binary code, that raw information that is captured by those telescopes before it is sent down to Earth and then translated into something else. So we translate that data into the visual representation of the object, in this case, Cassiopeia A, our good friend, the exploded star that is about 10,000 light years away from us. We're looking at this now just in optical light from the Hubble Space Telescope. But we can add the X-ray light from Chandra, for example, to really understand these very energetic processes that are happening as all of that hot emission is traveling out through space and expanding over time pretty quickly as well. And of course, we can also combine it with infrared data from the James Webb Space Telescope. So this is a version with the optical from Hubble. The Chandra is now in blue, and the Spitzer slash James Webb data is in like reds and golds and green. And you can see like what a really exquisitely detailed picture you can get when you're combining all of those different types of light and the different pieces of the image that come to light in the various ones. So you can see that sort of shock wave around the perimeter, mostly in the bright blue and a little bit in the red. You can see a little piece in the center. There's like reverse shocks essentially happening there. You can see where some of that cooler gas and dust are dissipating out, and it gives you just a lot more information. We can see these objects changing over time. So this is Cassiopeia A changing over the course of about 20 years. And we can see that that shockwave is expanding, right? Which is, again, pretty amazing that we can capture these types of changes in the data over the course of a human lifespan. We can see an exploded star expanding in space. We can take that data again, translate it a step forward with 3D modeling by understanding which of the data is moving away from us and which of that light or information is moving towards us to be able to represent it in 3D. That's how we create a 3D model, which we can move into, for example, virtual reality spaces, into augmented reality spaces where we can sort of break the image apart piece by piece. So you can select the jets, you can select the neutron star, etc. We can then 3D print it as well so that you can hold a version of it in your hand. And we can even put them onto hologram screens, which is just, again, amazing. Not something I ever thought I would be doing in my career. When I started this work back in, 1998, I did not think I would be working with 3D yurts and holograms and printing and all of these amazing technologies. They're all just different tools in the tool belt for both being able to understand the data, but also be able to communicate it. And then last but not least is the idea of data sonification. So taking this information into additional senses by essentially translating it into sound. So in this case, what we've done is we've taken that visual representation, we've taken all of those pixels that we get as a result, and we've mathematically mapped them into something that we can hear. This type of process of initial translation has been very useful scientifically for things like being able to understand stars that are variable stars that change really quickly, helping researchers understand galactic evolution, for example, being able to map and understand stellar characteristics, for example, but it also provides us with another way to communicate the data. So let's take a listen as we hear supernova remnant Cassiopeia A in infrared, X-ray, and optical light being translated into something we can hear. So it's not just the visual that we can use tactiles, we can use sound in order to both analyze, but also communicate this information. And again, all of that information that I just showed you on Cassiopeia A, this incredibly richly detailed supernova remnant we've captured data of, it all came from the same ones and zeros. And so just a final quote here from data. I never knew what a friend was until I met Jordy. He spoke to me as though I were human from data, because the data that we have. All right, so we can do this type of work with other objects as well. Cassiopeia A is one of our special cases, but it's not the only one. We've been able to model and bring into augmented reality IC443, which is another supernova remnant, and dozens of others as well. It really offers us a very useful scientific tool to be able to model in 3D, and then being able to take that out into communication as well to help convey that these are dynamic, multidimensional objects that are, changing and evolving in space has been pretty useful. And we have made 3D prints of all of these objects so that people can hold them. These are really popular when we go to public events and schools and other sorts of things like that as well. As you can imagine, being able to hold a dead star in your hand, even if it's scaled down super, super tiny, because Cassiopeia A is about 40 million billion times the size of our sun. So this is really tiny if you're holding it in like a 4-inch version. But still, the fact that you can hold that in your hand is pretty cool. So all of these materials that I've shown so far, these are all completely free. They're all available online. You can go to chandra.si.edu/3D print if you have access to a 3D printer at your library, your makerspace, your home, or otherwise. Or if you're interested in the VR or augmented reality side of things, you can go to chandra.si.edu/VR and play around with these to your heart's content. So I wanted to play another example of a sonification. I've just found these to be really exciting for people and also memorable. They offer a new way of thinking about our data, and they offer a new way of exploring our data. So I'm going to play for you a sonification of one of the most classic astronomical images ever, the Pillars of Creation. We are now looking at this version of the image instead of the infrared light from the James Webb Space Telescope we showed earlier. This is now an optical light from Hubble along with the X-ray light from Chandra. So we're going to scan from left to right for this data set. And you're going to hear the X-ray sources, those little temper tantrums, if you will, from those slightly older stars that are maturing, that are leaving the nest, so to speak. You're going to hear those as like beeps and boops. And then as we move towards the actual pillars, for which we do know the sort of three-dimensional shape of them, you'll hear that as like a synthetic sound that's very texturized to help denote the structure and the physicality of those tall pillars of gas and dust. So here we go, another piece to listen to. All right. And then one more piece, one of my favorites. This is called the Chandra Deep Field South. I like playing this sonification because image-wise is perhaps not the most exciting. It looks like a rectangle of colorful dots thrown onto it, right, on a black background. But scientifically, it's very important. This is the deepest X-ray image ever created. When Chandra looked at a very specific section of the sky for 40 days and 40 nights, what it found was a field of black holes. So this is the largest concentration of black holes we've ever captured in one image. We have thousands of black holes and galaxies with black holes at their cores visible in this image. They are color-coded by energy of the X-ray emission. So the lowest is red and the highest X-ray is blue. And so as we scan this image, we're going to go from bottom to the top because it's in stereo, which I don't think you can hear stereo through Zoom, but if you play this on your own afterwards, you should be able to hear the stereo. As you scan from the bottom to the top, you'll hear the lowest energy X-rays are mapped to the lower sounds and the highest to the higher sounds. And so you're just going to be listening essentially to a huge field of black holes. So as you're listening to that, I hope you're able to sort of envision yourself instead of in a field of daisies, you're in a field of black holes. One more sonification I'd like to play is called the Tycho Supernova Remnant. Now, this is another lovely example of the importance of needing different kinds of light. In this case, we've got optical data that is going to be like a sort of harp sound, and then the X-ray data is a little bit more synthesized. And we'll hear as we go out to that area, the perimeter around the supernova, that shockwave. As soon as we pass that, we'll sort of hear the sort of more beautiful emptiness that is space. And so I really like this one for that reason. That cutoff is very dramatic. And again, in this case, we're now mathematically map the data from the center region out to the edge. And the reason we have these different assignations for the various data sets is because each data needs to be understood and communicated differently. If we just swipe from left to right over something that is spherical shape, it sort of mushes everything out, right? It kind of just blends it all into brown, if you will. Whereas if we go from the central region out, we still are tracing all of that stellar debris as we then hit the perimeter and then go beyond into that broader interstellar space. And so I think I also love that one because my daughter played the harp for a bit and it just reminds me of that. And it's just so lovely. Again, so let's take a look at one more. This one is called the Perseus Cluster. There is a supermassive black hole in the very core of this image, sort of tucked inside that bright white spot. This is a pretty massive cluster of galaxies overall. And as that supermassive black hole is like sort of burping out into all of the gas around it, what it does is it causes these pressure waves, which are actually sound waves. So this is a very distant object and there's no, stuff in between us and it. We could never be able to hear this directly, right? However, what we can do is we can mathematically determine the note that it's singing because those pressure waves, those sound waves, we understand them. And so we know that this is a B flat, about 57 octaves below middle C. So way too deep for humans to hear naturally, regardless. However, we can sort of bring that back up into the realm of human hearing by bringing it back up about 57 octaves. And we're going to sort of pan around this one like a radar as we kind of hear those ripples in the data that demarcate that sort of that sound wave, that interaction after the burp of the supermassive black hole. So kind of fun, kind of interesting. This sonification went hugely viral, as you could probably imagine. Being able to hear the representation of a black hole singing in space was very exciting. My collaborators, Matt Russo and Andrew Santaguita, and I were all pretty surprised at how very popular this one was. But it was very exciting that people were getting fired up about being able to listen to astronomical data and just considering about the different ways we can process our information. So this was a really lovely project to have worked
Get ready
on.
for this, everyone. The actual
And here's
sound of
just
a
a few
black hole.
clips of how it went
Not the
viral.
literal sounds from the cosmos, but a translation to help blind and low vision people appreciate the majesty of space.
Anyway, so all of those sonifications, as I mentioned, this is a project that um, is also funded by the public and is available on the Chandra website. Someone actually took the sonifications, a record label, and made an album out of it. I do not make money from this, and I am not propagating anyone to actually go buy this, but it was really lovely to see the sort of public response to these sonifications. And that these different sensory sort of modalities, multimodalities have been so exciting for people to be able to explore. One last quick plug is a documentary if you want to be able to learn more on how these sonifications are made and the team behind them. Listen to the Universe is an award-winning documentary that's free on NASA Plus. Here's just a quick trailer if you want to find out more.
Sonifications are life-changing for me.
Black holes, galaxies, exoplanets, all kinds of cosmic objects. We can create experiences that translate them into sound.
I get to have that experience of the universe.
Listen to the Universe. Available now on NASA Plus.
So feel free to check that out. One of the biggest requests that we got was actually from musicians who wanted to be able to play the sonification data themselves. So we did bring in a composer to be able to help sort of clip some of these experiences through all of those beautiful images. And we have some free sheet music that we provide as well as sort of like yet another translation. And here's just a little clip of that. All right, so these are the types of things that I like to think about and talk about. I absolutely adore learning about the universe every single day. Every time we ask a question, we get like 10 new questions in its place. There's so much that we don't know. There's so much to explore. It's been a pretty wild ride so far in my tenure here. I just want to thank, of course, my funders and also just a final quote there from Crusher and Data as well. But again, any of the materials that I've mentioned today, you can access yourself. If you're interested in the sonification, you can go to chandra.si.edu/sound. I already mentioned the other two as well. And then finally, I just want to thank the Neuroverse for bringing me in today to be able to talk about these. Here's a little bit more on the Neuroverse initiative. They are committed to the following things. And again, I'd be happy to take questions and kind of listen to what you all want to know, if there are any questions, that is. I believe we are checking for questions now. There might not be any, which is totally fine as well. If not, I hope you all enjoyed our brief trip out into the universe and a little bit of understanding on how, like Geordie, we can access all of these different kinds of light and also in new ways, right? I've just always loved that my job has any kind of parallels to Star Trek at all. So being able to do work in holograms and through sound and to be able to access all these different kinds of light has been an absolute pleasure. So I'm assuming there aren't any questions, Melissa. Let me know. Everyone is saying they're stunned. Oh no. I hope that's in a good way. Oh, that's great. Oh, I'm gonna assume that you're stunned in a positive way. Yes, the sonifications are very beautiful. If I do say so myself, it is just been incredible to work on that type of project. I first learned about sonifications because of my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Wanda Diaz. She is an astronomer and computer scientist who is blind, and she uses sonification. She writes her own sonification software to be able to understand things like stellar populations and gravitational waves. And I've always just been so inspired by that. So to have even a small part to play in helping showcase the value of sonifications has been just an absolute highlight, right? And I think we use sonifications all the time in our daily life. They're used very often in medicine. They are used in our cars, for example, to let us know as we're, say, approaching an object, right? They're used in different places. They're used in our kitchen. And if you think about it, even the human voice is a sonification. So just kind of being open to the idea of experiencing data through sound is a pretty amazing thing. So, all right, with all that, I will assume there are no other questions. I'm very happy to hear that you found this useful. What made someone think to convert different information emanating from stars? Well, so in the case of Wanda, for example, my colleague Wanda Diaz, because she is blind, she doesn't have another way to access the information. She can't access it visually. So she wrote her own software to be able to understand stellar characteristics. And we have other astronomers who use sonification to take what are called light curves. So it's just a plot essentially, and it's very they can be hard to look at 100 plots all at once, right? They can look similar. So when you have something like that that you can sonify instead and listen to them, it provides you another way of being able to understand the data. And so astronomers have been able to adapt the field of sonification like others have. Sonification is used in, for example, protein folding, for example, in economics, in different kinds of education and training. Sonifications are used, as I mentioned, in medicine. And so being able to adapt techniques that other fields are using for astronomical purposes has been very, very useful for us. It is pretty amazing that we can do that. And a very cool thing too, and one that Wanda Diaz found out through her PhD, I believe, was that humans can learn to become better listeners. So you can train yourself to be able to listen to data, just like you can train yourself to be able to look through data. And there are strengths in being able to listen to, say, changes or large amounts of data, for example, over just perusing it through a visual. Let's see, are there any museums or other places that make use of the data for installations? Well, our images are certainly all over the place in museums and other educational and informal learning environments, for example, schools and libraries and even national parks. We've had our images up in for sure. And as far as the sonifications, which maybe is what I'm wondering if you mean as well, there are actually a couple museums currently in the works to create a sonification installation. And I believe one is going to open this year. And we have another couple slated probably later this year or early next year, which again will be really exciting to see. Interactive installations of sonifications where you can touch a wall and listen to that part of the sonification of that data, for example, I think would be a really great way for folks to be able to listen and learn. And we do actually, now that I recall, we do have a sonification in a museum in the UK. I'm forgetting what it's called. But anyways, we do have one in the UK as well. So yeah, I think my time is up, right? It's 5:45. I think that's when I was supposed to go. But thanks again for the lovely questions and the very nice comments. I hope you enjoyed our multimodal trip through our universe.